I'm Mikki, and this is Mikkipedia, where I sit down and chat to doctors, professors, athletes, practitioners, and experts in their fields related to health, nutrition, fitness, and well-being. And I'm delighted that you're here. Hello everyone, hope you are having a fabulous week. Mikki here, you're listening to Mikkipedia, as you know. And I am excited to bring to you a conversation today with my mate, Mal Law. Now, anyone in the trail running scene will know that Mal needs no introduction. He is a regular on one of my favourite podcasts, Dirt Church Radio. He is the founder of Wild Things, an online running community, which is an awesome Facebook group, the VIP group. In addition, has access to a directory of runs all around New Zealand, giving reviews, giving kind of trail updates and all the rest of it. And it is really all about community, Wild Things. And that is a lot of what Mal and I talk about today on the show. Also, The Wild, a new miler event taking place November 2022, of which Mal and I have a bit of a chat about. And also, we go over Mal's background, how he has developed his love of running into something where he's been able to give back. So people will be well familiar with all of his work in fundraising for mental health, and of course his High 5-0 challenge, where he set out to run 50 mountain marathons over 50 peaks in just 50 days, where he managed to exceed his initial $250,000 fundraising goal for mental health to be able to get over $500,000, which is absolutely amazing. And Mal has done so much more than that. He is an advocate for running, he's an advocate for mental health, and he's an advocate for community. And he spends much of his time being able to bring all of these things together. We talk a lot about all of this and more, including how we sort of got into it in this talk today. Alright team, you will find links to everything that we talk about in the show notes for today's episode. Enjoy this conversation that I have with Mal Law, the original Wild Thing. Kia ora, Mal. How's your Sunday afternoon going?
Oh, very well, thanks, Mikki. It's lovely to take a bit of time out and have a chat with you. Looking forward to it.
Well, do you know what? I would have asked you had you been on an awesome run in Wanaka today over the hills and the mountains, but I do know when we sent a couple of texts late last week, you were sitting in the Fork and Tap and you said, mate, I've just finished a 5-day fast pack of the Wild course. So I imagine a bit of recovery has been taking place.
I had a couple of days off. I did manage to get up a mountain this morning there. So, but actually, you know what? My body is feeling fantastic. It's quite an unusual. It's quite an unusual thing, but you know that 5-day fast pack. Just some low intensity, long days carrying a bit of weight. There's nothing like it for conditioning.
It's awesome actually, and you know that I think it would fit well into that zone 2 training, which we understand more and more is not only building a great foundation with which we can build fitness from, but actually from an overall health and longevity perspective is where we really should be focusing our attention, Mel. So I mean, you are basically ticking the boxes in all the right ways.
Well, that's good to know. Thanks, Coach.
You're welcome. Hey, now, so Mel, you know, I really am so thrilled to be able to speak to you today because, you know, you are an adventurer, you're a storyteller, and you're a fundraiser. And you, I think, over the years has raised more money for different charities than pretty much anyone that I could name. And it's all it's done on the foundation of doing what you really love, which is kind of being out there, exploring in the mountains, running out in nature. Not all the time. I know there were some roads involved as well. But
not often, Mikki. No, you won't find many. You won't find many roads in there.
So first of all, Mal, can you kind of give us a bit of your background and you know, how did you get into this whole running thing? Or is that just, how did that all kind of come about?
Oh, blimey, how long a history do you want? I mean, I've got a lot of history given how old I am. I guess I've I've been running in one form or another most of my life. I was the weird kid at school who actually enjoyed cross-country running, but it really wasn't a cool thing to do when you grew up in Liverpool. And so I also got quite good at running away from the people that wanted to beat me up for liking cross-country running. And then I did a couple of half marathons on the road during my 20s, but I was generally more interested in other things like beer and trying to chat up women unsuccessfully, all the things that you generally do in your 20s. And then in my I started to get into, I suppose, my love of the outdoors. It was instilled in me by my dad originally, but like most kids, I rebelled and didn't take it up until my late 20s, when I started getting into doing some hill walking, which was my dad's first love. And then I moved to New Zealand, and there was a pivotal moment when, at the end of my first year in New Zealand, I went tramping in the Nelson Lakes. And it was the first time I'd ever done an overnight hike of any kind. I'd only ever done day hikes up until that point. And it was just like, the lights went on, and it was like, oh my God. I had no idea this kind of thing existed. And it was a start of a love affair with the outdoors. And it was what basically has kept me in New Zealand, because I was on a 1-year working visa at that point, and 34 years later, I'm still here. So that was quite a transformational experience. So for years I did a lot of tramping, quite a lot of recreational mountain biking in the very early days on steel frame bikes with no suspension. And in my mid-30s, I discovered multisport. And started doing multi-sport races, culminating in a couple of coast to coasts and the likes. So that was my big passion for about 10 years, and that's when I first, I guess, started running on trails as opposed to walking trails or running on roads.
Was it the speed of the mountain biking made you realise that walking was great, but actually running would be a bit quicker?
Yeah, I mean, I did both for a long time. I still occasionally jump on a bike, but not very often these days.
Yeah.
I love that. In fact, I would say back in those days, my first love was probably mountain biking, actually. And just little by little, the balance has changed. And obviously, the last 10, 11 years, it's been pretty much all about running.
Yeah. So, Mel, if I look over, some of the things that you've achieved from that, I suppose I want to start with your fundraising, if that's all right. At what point in time did you realize that your love of the outdoors and being out there, walking, running, could be used as a vehicle to raise money for some of these charities like the leukemia and also, of course, Mental Health New Zealand? So when did that light bulb kind of go off for you?
I think it had always been in the back of my mind to do something. I mean, way back when I first left university at the tender age of 21, I actually rode a road bike from London to Lisbon over 3 weeks and raised, I don't know, 100 quid or something it might have been for the leukemia charity in the UK. So that was the very first fundraiser I did. And I think ever since then, I always kind of thought one day I'll do more of that.
Yeah.
And then, the idea of doing 7 great walks in 7 days came to me in 2008. And it was a pretty natural choice of charity, because my brother died of leukemia, and I'd always said I wanted to do some more in that space. So I guess what I never expected was to become a fundraiser on the scale that I have become or did become. I started off with a fairly modest goal for that 7 in 7. And then I guess I just realized that with a bit of creative thinking, you can multiply the efforts of one person, recruit a team of people around you and get them to assist with the fundraising. So I've used that pyramid selling model for fundraising ever since, really.
And what is it with if I think about the 7 and 7, like at the time you were working full time in addition to training and doing that and doing the kind of groundwork to set up 7 and 7?
I just finished doing like a 3-year stint of working for a multinational, doing lots and lots and lots and lots of travel, and was completely burnt out on that. So the original idea was that I'd take the summer off and just regroup and have a bit of time in the wilderness to find my soul again. And it was on the very first tramp I did that the idea of the 7 and 7 came, and I then realised that, hey, if I'm going to do this justice, I pretty much turned it into a full-time job, because it was, well, unpaid job. It was a full-time occupation, because there's so much to organise in the way of logistics, sponsorship, fundraising, publicity, and training, because my base fitness was lower than it had been in 20 years when I came up with the idea. So I had to get myself back into some semblance of fitness. So I didn't have to juggle it with a full-time job now.
Yeah.
But I made it one instead.
Yeah. So Mel, I really want to know what's involved in setting up a campaign like that, because, there are, the most recent one I can think of is Brooke Thomas, who went from, Cape Reinga to the Bluff, and like an amazing effort to run the length of New Zealand, but and raise a significant amount of money. I know, crazy, right? But not everyone is successful with this. So what is it what goes into a campaign? And you've had multiple opportunities now to kind of have a bit of a formula, and I'm going to say get it right. Not that I'm suggesting it's 100%, but it might well be. What is it that you can do that makes it successful?
You can't build a house on rocky foundations. You can't. And to me, the foundation of any successful fundraising campaign has to be that you're doing it for a cause that genuinely matters to you, that you truly empathise with, and have a story to tell around. I mean, Brooke's story was fantastic. Now, she had a heart condition as a kid. She was given a pacemaker. She was raising money for heart kids. There was a coherent story to tell there about why that charity mattered to her and why she wanted to raise money. And, likewise, my fundraising efforts have come around two personal tragedies in my life: the death of my brother when I was a wee nipper from leukemia, which is why I raised money for that cause, and the death of my brother-in-law, who took his own life, which raised the possibility of raising funds for a mental health cause, and combined with my own periodic struggles with, I get depressed from time to time, and but the thing that I think has really worked well in the mental health space as well is that not only have I got a genuine story to tell about why it matters to me and why I care, but the nature of the challenge that I'm undertaking fits very nicely with the cause that I'm raising money for. So there is, without a shadow of a doubt, as most runners will tell you, very great therapeutic benefits to running in terms of maintaining mental well-being. So when there is a connection between the activity and the cause, and there's a genuine reason for wanting to support that cause, I think they're the foundations for a successful campaign. And I think the other thing I learned early on is you go into these things with very unreal expectations about how easy it is going to be to open people's purse strings and wallets. And you naively think if you put up a couple of posts on Facebook that people will think, oh, that's cool. And there's so much competition for people's time and money. And one lesson I learned very early on in the 7 and 7, there was 1 week where I had articles. I thought I did all the mainstream media stuff. I had an article appear, I think it was in the Sunday Times, Women's Weekly, and Wilderness magazine, something like 3 big titles in 1 week, and it coincided with the weakest week of fundraising that I had at that point. I was like, I was expecting to see thousands of dollars pouring in, and nothing happened. And that's when I kind of realized that the people who are going to give you money are the people who know you.
Yeah.
And if they don't know you, they've got to feel like they know you.
Yeah.
So that's when I really started doing a lot more, shying away so much from doing mainstream media interviews, and just started blogging on my own, telling the stories as I went. And people would get those on a regular basis. And little by little, they kind of, even if they'd never met me, they kind of got to feel like they did know me. And ultimately, a lot of those people would donate at some point.
Yeah.
So there's no silver bullet. It's a long, hard struggle to build up that kind of rapport with an audience and get them to the point where they know you, trust you, and feel like they want to support you financially.
Yeah. So, Mel...
So that's some of my learnings.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, if I think, like, you've done some amazing things, like the 7 and 7, and you did it twice, didn't you? Did it once? And...
Yeah, I did a second version of it on different trails,
Yeah. And then you did the High 50 challenge. Then there was the Coast Path Run 2012. And
yes, around the Southwest Coast Path of the UK.
That's right. And so all along the way, as you were kind of like, these were in what I would say kind of fairly quick succession, really. Like from a fitness perspective and from a running perspective, what was some of the challenges in and around keeping yourself in a position to be able to do what you wanted to do around that? And I say quick succession. I mean, it was over a number of years, but like quite demanding, I suppose.
I mean, the hardest lesson to learn at the outset was, I mean, the running I had done competitively. And when let's just qualify this. I'm not anything like an elite athlete, but I was a mid-pack runner with ambitions of trying to do as well as I could every time I put a number on. So I was in the habit of running as fast as I could, as much as I could, and I soon realised that when you're preparing for something like 7 Great Walks in 7 days, you're probably going to come unstuck fairly fast if all your training is based around that kind of approach. And if you try and take that approach during the week of the challenge itself. So the hardest lesson I had to learn at the start was to slow down. I had the fine art of running slowly. I think I ended up calling it, and it was a hard lesson to learn. And I still remember being out in my old stomping ground, the Whitex, back in the good old days when it was all mud and not gravel and stairs. And I'd be walking up a hill, and I'd see people coming the other way, and I'd immediately break into a run because I didn't want to be seen walking. No such qualms these days. I can't run up hills anyway. So, that was a hard lesson to learn. So, what I then discovered was that if I did just back off the intensity a little, and I back in those days, I was probably still a bit more scientific about my running. So I set myself an absolute maximum heart rate that I would not go above. I think it was 155, something like that.
Yeah.
And all my training was based around never going above that.
Yeah.
And I soon found that if I didn't do the intensity, I could go long, and with good sleep and good food, I could recover very quickly, and I could do another 5-hour session the next day and another 5 hours the day after. So that was for a long time, I think, my key strength was the ability to recover. But it was built around the fact that I could be sensible about my speed.
Yeah, for sure.
Most flattering way to put it.
Oh, no, and isn't that a lesson that we all tend to learn the older we get in the sport of running, it's so easy to kind of go too hard, too fast, and then spend too long kind of recovering that. Right now we're doing a training program, just a bit of a tangent, which incorporates about 4 sessions per week on some weeks, like 4 actual sessions and amongst other like recovery runs and stuff like that. And we just did a run this morning, and I said to Babes, I just think that this program that we're following is probably about 5 or 7 years too old for this program. Like, surely this is just too much intensity, because it's that real groundwork, like we were talking about earlier, the zone 2 stuff. And it sounds to me like that at your kind of 155, you're really building that strength and building that endurance base because you need it for what you were doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it works for that kind of multi-day challenge. It works for ultra running. Obviously, the approach you take is very much dependent on what kind of running you're doing. I mean, if you're if you're training for the Xterra series in Auckland, you're trying to go really hard for 2 hours to kick off the long course. Different kind of training is required. So qualify that. I've always, one of the very first lessons I learned through multisport and having a little bit of input from John Ackland back in the early days. He always used to preach specificity, and you build your training very specifically around what the event is that you're training for. So if it's got a lot of hills, you do a lot of hills. If it's got a lot of rough ground, you do a lot of rough ground. So that's probably one lesson from my early days that I really hold on to as well.
Yeah, nice. So when you dreamed up your first 7 and 7 challenge, how did Sally respond?
Look, I've told this story before, but I can't resist telling it again. So the idea came to me while I was on a 6-day tramp across the Kaimanawa and Kawaka ranges. And it came to me on the first day, and I had all this time to just contemplate it. And I came out the other end, and it was I was really excited about it, but it was 2 or 3 weeks later, I hadn't actually plucked up the courage to tell Sal about it. She'd heard a lot of ideas from me already by that stage, and a lot of them kind of just faded off into nothing. So it's like, got to be a little bit more certain I really intend to go through on this one before I share it. And then my hand was forced because she gave me an early Christmas present, and when I opened it, it was a copy of the Dean Carnazzi's book, the story of him running 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. And attached to the front cover of the book is a little yellow post-it note saying, "For information only, don't go getting any ideas." And so I immediately had to front up and confess that I'd had a rather silly idea. How did she react? Just brilliantly. She went, "Wow, if that's what you want to do, that's awesome. Tell me how I can help." And she was, as she has been in every one of my endeavours, an absolute stalwart, an absolute rock. And very, very lucky to have her support and her love in my life. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, that is truly amazing. And certainly, what they say is behind every successful man is a super awesome, even more successful, very well organized woman, right? Or something like that. That's how it runs in our house anyway.
Yeah, and she is the organized one, yeah.
Yeah. So Mel, from your kind of inception of the idea, how many months until it actually came to fruition?
It was a year. It was a full year. And probably the first few months were not terribly intense. It was had to do some basic research. First of all, find out what the Great Walks actually were. I think I knew for sure the Root Burn was and the Milford was. I wasn't quite sure what the other ones were. And then I had a couple of multi-sport and mountain biking things to get out of the way. Once they were out of the way, it was a case of really starting to ramp up the training on foot. I was starting from a very, very low base of running fitness. So I was going from pretty much zero running fitness to having to be ready to do 360 kilometers in a week. Yeah,
amazing. And it's like, and this is a question for, I guess, any of the challenges really that you've done. Like, are there moments where you think, I'm not going to be able to get this off the ground, and not just in terms of your own physical ability to do it, but just to have everything kind of it doesn't all fall together. Obviously, it's very well organized, but, from a fundraising perspective, from getting the people you need to be doing what you need them to be doing, like, were there moments where you were like, my goodness, this is just not going to come together?
I don't think I've ever reached that point where I've thought this isn't going to work. I have a lot of ideas, Mikki, as I've mentioned already, and Sal is my sieve. She will listen to ideas, and she said, I don't really start taking anything serious until you've mentioned it 5 or 6 times, and then I know you're serious about it.
Yeah.
So once I get to that stage, nothing is going to stop me. So I have I have a pretty stubborn streak, and once I'm committed, I will see it through. So I don't think I've ever sort of despaired that no, it's not going to happen. I have most definitely despaired as to how I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I have put myself into some very stressful situations. I've had minor breakdowns because I've just taken on way too much and just cannot cope. And every now and again, particularly during the organisation for the High 50, which was massive logistical jigsaw, pulling together a 7-week tour around the country with 300 plus support runners, and the logistics are ridiculous. And I think there was a couple of times during that where I had major, I just broke down for days at a time and just was incapable of doing anything, and just had to basically learn to be kind to myself and just give myself time to get back on track and find my mojo again and start all over. But even in the depths of that stuff, I don't think I ever said this isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I was never tempted to give up on them, no.
Yeah, that's amazing, Mel. And with your challenges, did you ever reach the end of any of them and go, okay, that's it, that I've done? Or actually, or is it like a race? You get to the end of a race and you're like, that's it. Yeah. And then a day later, it's like, right, what's next?
Yeah, no, pretty much. I think every single one I would have said that.
Yeah.
But and then a week later you find yourself scheming about what the next one is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a love affair. It's very very hard to give up, and still, I think I probably am now genuinely done with multi-day big adventure fundraising. Because I just have to recognise that my body's not got the ability to recover the way it used to. I've compromised it, I think, too much now. But that doesn't stop me still dreaming and scheming and finding myself wanting to do these things. I just have to find other ways to raise that money. I'm $40,000 shy of raising $1 million across them all. And
right.
And it's like I've got to find a way somehow to do that without breaking myself physically. I don't know what it is. I'll come up with something one day.
I think so. And now that you've actually kind of said that, I'm sure that someone listening to this might have an idea in their head, and they can contact you, and then together you can kind of scheme something, right?
Yeah.
Ideally,
we'll find a way. Yeah. We'll find a way.
And you know what, Mel? You've just been such an inspiration to the trail running community, more than the trail running community, but particularly you've really highlighted a sport and just an activity that so many of us absolutely love, and we've found a lot of inspiration in obviously what you've done. And from that kind of genesis, if you like, of that fundraising and doing your amazing challenges, you were able to then build a community, and you started Wild Things. What was it? So at what point, I suppose, in your journey did you think, hey, I can bring these people together to be part of something a little bit bigger than what they might already be a part of?
Actually, it's quite a clear period of time where the idea for Wild Things came together in my mind. And it would have been during the early part of 2016. So what are we now? Yeah, exactly 5 years ago. So following the High 50, I went into the High 50, I think, already on the verge of some kind of fatigue, just from the stress of trying to bring the thing together and the physical training required. And then I went and did 50 mountains in 50 days and ran myself ragged. Without realizing it, I was in deep chronic fatigue for 12 months afterwards. And then 12 months on, denying it to myself and ignoring the advice of all my friends, it just came to a crashing halt, and I just literally collapsed mid-run
Mate.
and could barely put one foot in front of the other. Went to my GP, and my GP said, yep, you know why you've got chronic fatigue, don't you, Mal? And he basically ordered me to just go cold turkey and complete. I had to do a complete reset. So I went 4 months without running.
Wow. Mel, when your doctor gave you that diagnosis of chronic fatigue and you actually realised that there was no other option but to take your foot off the accelerator in a big way, how did you feel?
Oh, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was because it had become my life. I mean, doing these challenges had become my life, dangerously so. In retrospect, you know, I was pretty obsessive about it. So it's probably no wonder that it resulted in, you know, in the diagnosis that it eventually did. But it's really interesting, Mikki, because you come to realise just how much your own sense of identity and your own sense of self-worth is caught up in that. So I had come to think of myself as this unbreakable runner. My strength was, as I've mentioned earlier, I think, being able to recover from day to day and just do things day after day. And through that derive a lot of pleasure, and then have the reward of seeing it put to a good cause, and, you know, raising money and as we did through the High Five, I know we literally saved lives through doing that, and that's a massively rewarding thing. So to then be told you've done too much of that, you can't do it anymore, and it wasn't initially a take 3 months off. It was a you've got to permanently change your lifestyle kind of diagnosis from the GP, which he later backed down on a little, saying what you've got to realise now is that there's a decent percentage of people who have chronic fatigue who never recover, and you could be one of those. But I think you've got a better than average chance of recovering because we can at least clearly identify what the triggers were that have led to yours. But you do need to have a change of lifestyle, and you do need to learn. You do need to learn to take some more time out, physically, mentally, emotionally. So, you know, I wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to run long distance again. I wasn't sure if I'd ever do another multi-day adventure. And that was devastating, Mikki, absolutely devastating. I was losing a way of life, and I was losing my self-identity and my sense of self-worth with it. So, yeah, it was a horrible 4 to 6 months, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. So take care of yourselves, people.
Was it hard for those around you as well?
You better ask Sal that, I know. I like to think I dealt with it an awful lot better than I expected I would. I think Sal would probably say the same. I'm sure I had my grumpy moments. I'm not the easiest person in the world to live with, you might be surprised to hear. And, you know, being forced into a position where I couldn't do any exercises, not likely to make me any better humoured. I knew I had to do it if I ever wanted to do it. I had to take the time out if I ever wanted to do this stuff again. And I recognised this was my body's way of telling me, you didn't listen. So we told you time and time again, and you did not listen. So this time we're going to make sure you bloody well listen, because you've got no choice. And so I listened. And I 90% recovered. I'm still more susceptible to. I know what the warning signs are. I can see them coming, and I know when to back off. So I have had to learn some new skills and become a bit more self-aware, and live with the fact that, you know, I'm not going to go and do another 50 peaks in 50 days. But I'm at peace with that.
Yeah, do you know, it's interesting, Mel, because potentially had your doctor given you the like a different prognosis, as in this is how you feel now, but it might be all right. You potentially wouldn't have had the real impetus to stop, like, because we're runners, we're very good at reading between the lines, at testing.
Totally. We hear what we want to hear, don't we?
Totally, all the time. And I can totally appreciate what you mean being devastated. Like, I get devastated when my calf gets tight. I'm like, oh my God, I'll never run again. I'm running again the next day, but it's just that's how we're built, really, isn't it? It's how we're wired. Yeah.
The funny thing through all that was, it just shows you how my mind works. And I came up with the idea while I couldn't run of turning not running into a fundraiser. Like, I am not going to run for 100 days. Sponsor me not to run for 100 days. I raised about $7,000 by not running for 100 days.
Mate, that's amazing. Think of all of the people out there that could be fundraising right now from sitting on their chuffs doing nothing.
And this is how all my best ideas, all my ideas, and lots of people will understand this, come when I'm out walking or running.
Yeah.
I don't know, the creative juices flow when I'm out there doing something. So I have anyway for quite a long time. The original idea wasn't so much about building a community. That wasn't really consciously the motivation at the outset. But I guess I come from this background in the UK where people collect peaks. It's peak bagging. People go and they try and climb all the peaks in Scotland, or they try all the peaks in the UK. So this whole culture around peak bagging that I'd grown up with, was kind of part of, and I'd always liked the idea of trying to do for peak bagging, for trying to do the equivalent of peak bagging, but with trails, and turn trails into a collectible item, and give people the means and the encouragement to start collecting runs, and through that, encouraging people to explore this beautiful country of ours, to fall in love with trail running. So it was while I was going through this period of chronic fatigue, and I was having some beautiful walk just down on the shores of Lake Wanaka each morning with the dog, who was giving me some brilliant tips and mindfulness and living in the moment as we went. And I was trying not to think about anything. I was under strict orders not to be thinking about anything. But this idea just kept going round and round, and it just, the healthier I got, the louder the voice got inside me, to the point it's like, I've got to do something with this. And then so I started then looking at, well, what would it take to build a website so we could have this trail directory on there. And I soon realized that it was going to take a lot of work and a lot of money to actually build a website that could do that would fulfill my vision. So then it really became a mandatory that I build a community around it, because somehow we had to monetize it in order to pay the bill for the web development.
Yeah.
And so that's really when the idea of, well, maybe it's not just about having a resource. Maybe it's about having a community, a club that we build around that resource. And if we give them enough inspiration, enough information, enough ideas, maybe people would even pay for it. And that's great, because then we've got some money in the pot and we can just keep doing more and more and more with that money, which is beautifully how it's worked out.
Yes.
Just like that.
Yeah, just like that.
Just like that. Yeah.
That's amazing, because what it's I was thinking about it, the trail running community, and there are little hubs. You've got, like, up here in Auckland, you had the Waitakere Bush runners, you had the Huia runners, you've got things like that, and they're like littered across New Zealand and of course other countries as well, but nothing it's not formalized as such. And you're part of a small community, whereas it feels like with road running, there is definitely much more of an avenue for that community in terms of the Harriers Club, that's
right. Yes,
there summer, winter, and it's just kind of part of like what you do and who you are. And I, to be like part of the Wild Things community kind of brings you to be part of a much more global kind of group, if you like, and there's a lot of that camaraderie. There's a lot of kind of shared experience, even though it's essentially, it can be a really solo activity, and particularly in light of the last year with COVID, where we've had these periods of time where we've been unable to go out and actually run with our mates, we can still have those same conversations and same shared experiences virtually, but because of the likes of the Wild Things running group, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and I did when I started thinking, well, we need to build a community around this idea. That was one of the first things I realised, is that it's very fragmented around the country, that there are little Facebook groups all over the place. But there was no centralised hub for having conversations about trail running.
Yeah.
And I know from having run training camps and the likes in the past, that one thing trail runners love is to talk about trail running.
Oh yeah.
They come along to camp. They come along to camp for a weekend. Like, oh, it's been so great. I can just talk about this stuff all weekend, and no one thinks I'm weird. If I do this at home, everyone just kind of like rolls their eyes and walks away.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's a real role for a chat room, which is essentially what the Facebook group is, where people can just share and ask questions and get answers and ask ask where's the best seam seal jacket, questions like that have been asked 100 times on the group.
But we were always going to ask it, Mel. And it's more than the Facebook group, as you mentioned, training camps, because that's something else that you've kind of gotten off the ground in the last few years, haven't you? Like training experiences and race packages and things like that for people to come kind of share a few days with you and other runners, either before a race or in the build up to a race. Like, what are the logistics in and around that?
They can be quite logistically hard as well. I mean, the first ones we ever actually the first ones I ever did was when we were still living in Auckland, and we had a little batch out in the Waitex, and I just organised some informal weekends. We did we invited half a dozen people out to the batch for a weekend, cooked them some home cooked food, and took them trail running in the Waitex, and it was all completely illegal and under the radar. We had no permits or anything. But I hope no one from Dock is listening. And then we started doing some camps for the Tarawera race.
That's right.
Where we hired out the outdoor education centre and had 50, 60 people turn up and
amazing
spend the weekend doing this stuff. Yeah. So, I mean, they were a lot of fun. And then I guess, and we also started doing trail running tours. So we organised our first week-long Top of the South tour back in, I think, 2012.
Oh, wow.
And really, we had 3 or 4 tours that we did over 3 or 4 years, and always really struggled to get the numbers. And I think we were just a little bit ahead of the game, ahead of the market in that one. And then those things and we started doing trips to events like the Shot Over Moonlight and August as well. But those things largely went on a back burner once we started getting into the online world and building the whole Wild Things experience for people. And it was only really last year, it was the COVID revelation, I think, for us, was that, hey, it's great that we've got a platform built that gives people a sense of belonging and a community to share their passions with. But I'm really missing face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
So, we started up tours again. We've got a couple of tours that we do each year, a couple of week-long running tours that we do each year. And also started up doing Wild Things Musters, the club runs run by volunteers around the country. Because I just realised that the limitations of being online only, and really wanting to have more face-to-face interaction again.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I just, having the both elements, I feel like that is really like the key to building something really successful. Like, yes, the online community is absolutely, like, I feel like it's necessary as a part of this, but then to have that in-person experience and to go out in the bush and or on the trail and do what you really love with the people who you may or may not have met before. I mean, that just brings with it like a really special experience. Yeah,
I mean, if you treated it purely as a business proposition, we've got Wild Things now to a point where it's a sustainable business. We're I don't know if we've actually taken any drawings from it because everything goes back into web development, but there's a sustainable model there. But to me, I don't want to live my life behind the computer having online conversations with people. I don't want my life to be purely built around that. I want to also have face-to-face interaction with these people who have a shared passion. So, I kind of realised that we're in danger of becoming recluses behind our laptop, and basically providing lots of other people with the inspiration to get out and do cool things and meet people, but not have the benefit of it ourselves. So it was, for me, that it's not a business imperative, but it is a personal imperative that we have both sides. We have the online side, but there's personal interaction as well wherever possible.
Yeah, nice. Well, Mel, you're not done and dusted yet, though, with regards to your ability to kind of get out and about and these ideas, and potentially because you've got Wild Things to where it is at, and a sustainable business, which of course you need to spend time on, but you can kind of, I think, probably turn your attentions to other projects, and this is where the Wild comes in.
Yeah, the Wild.
Tell me about the Wild. Wild.
Wild is going to be epic. So the idea for the Wild came about when we fast-packed the Hard Rock course over in Colorado about 2.5 years ago, with Frosty as our guide, which was pretty awesome, doing it with a 2-times winner of the race. And it was such a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I came away from there going, oh my God, why hasn't New Zealand got a race like this?
Yeah.
We've got mountains, we've got the terrain. People are really getting into the ultra thing and doing longer and longer distances and looking for bigger and bigger challenges. I mean, we need something like this in New Zealand. And I was like, no, but you're not a race organizer, Mel, don't do it. So I told myself I wasn't going to do it because it's not my core competence. But the idea just would not go away. So lots and lots and lots of poring over maps. We came up with a 100-mile course, which is what I've always thought of as the Hard Rock of the Southern Hemisphere, but knew that to actually have a chance of making this come to fruition, you also need shorter courses to bring in more people to help subsidise the cost of a 100-mile race. So we're doing a 50-mile and a 20-mile as well. And it's been building now for 2 years. I mean, it's a good 2 years ago that I started poring over maps and figuring out where we could go. And it's now becoming real. The best thing we did was to recognise that I am a dreamer and a schemer, not a race organizer. So I've got the passion for putting together the course. I love the whole promotional side of it. But when it comes to filling in forms and writing safety plans and getting concessions and organising volunteers and that kind of thing, then I'm not your man. So we bought in Fusion Events, who do the Ultra NZ series.
Awesome.
They are going to work in partnership with us to make it happen. So we've got their professionalism, their systems to make sure that my dream can become a reality.
So Mel, when does this take place?
It is December next year, December 2022. So we hopefully will be opening entries. It'll be this year sometime, hopefully middle of the year. The courses are all approved in principle, but the paperwork's not all done. So that until the concessions are all signed off fully, then we don't want to be in the position of taking anyone's money. We'll be pre-screening people who are interested, because it's where we're sending people is pretty mean country, and it's not a place to go if you're not experienced in traveling through that kind of terrain. So we will be screening everybody that wants to take part, particularly in the 100 and the 50-mile events. because it's not your average trail run.
Can you give us any indication?
Not your average ultra run.
Yeah, any indication of kind of where it's going to be broadly, what it entails, vert, anything like that?
It's all been revealed after our 5-day trip over the course.
Yeah, tell us.
Just last week. So we start and finish at Coronet Peak Ski Field.
Oh.
And we do a mass on the 100 mile. It's a massive, but all 3 courses are perfect loops. There's nothing contrived about them. There's no out and back. There's no loops within loops. They're just a beautiful, clean journey through the mountains.
Yeah.
But the 100 mile goes deep into the backcountry between Arrowtown and Wanaka. A lot of it is on the Mahu Whenua area, which is a whole heap of high country station that was turned over into Kiwi 2 Conservation Trust by the owners. And it is ridiculously wild, ridiculously beautiful country. So what else? We've got over 11,000 meters of climb.
Oh my goodness.
Over 100 miles. But what I think makes it tougher than anything is the nature of some of that climb. There's a lot of stuff where we leave the trail altogether and you're just smashing through knee-high tussock up a 45-degree angle slope to make a ridge.
Right.
So it's going to be incredibly grueling. It's going to be a very, very tough foot race.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see the kind of times that people can do and just how many people can finish. Yeah. But we want it to be. It is definitely achievable. That's the nice thing. We weren't trying to do another Revenant whereby most people going, no, they haven't got hope in hell of finishing. We want people to come feeling they got a chance of finishing, and they have. And I would hope that we get at least 2/3 of people finishing.
That's amazing.
But there will be a high attrition rate. You can be sure of that.
Yeah. And so you just did a fast pack. Did you take anyone else with you?
Yeah, I took a few people with me. Took some friends. Took Katie Wright with us over the first 3 days.
Yeah.
Katie is just one. She came 2 weeks after winning that fantastic Tarawera 100 miler.
Amazing.
That turned into a sprint finish with Fiona.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, she's slogging it out in the hills, making it look easy with a big pack on her back. I don't know how she does it. So she came with us. We had a nice little group of people went round.
That sounds awesome. I love doing stuff like that. Just out in the bush, kind of doing what you love, but also with a view in mind of this exciting adventure kind of coming up and the fact that you're involved in like putting it together. Yeah.
So I said to someone at one point while we were going around during that 5 days that I realised that the beauty of what we were doing was that normally when I'm out doing something like that, it's very much about it being a personal challenge. It's like, I want to finish this. I've got to get to the end. And I don't think that thought once crossed my mind. The whole time I was thinking, oh my God, this is something beautiful that we are creating for other people to come and do. So amazing. It wasn't, it was a very, very different mindset to anything I've done before, where I suppose for so many years just been wrapped up in my challenge, personal challenge, going to get there, going to do it. And I've got to say, it's a very refreshing change of mindset to be creating something purely for the enjoyment and the challenge of others, aside from my own goals. Yeah.
That's awesome, Mel. And is there an opportunity for you to go and do either the 20, 50 or the 100 miler? Is that going to be part of the game plan, or are you going to be too busy helping others with what they're doing?
I quite like the idea of just being on course somewhere at some. I've got a point in mind where I quite fancy being, and just being out there to give people encouragement. I think that's what I'll be doing during the race. I variously said I would like to do the 100 mile myself in one go, just to see how long it would take me. I have changed my mind on that several times. I'm currently thinking maybe I would, but whether I do or not, I don't know. I'd certainly go and do the 50 mile, just for kicks.
Yeah.
But again, the 100 mile, I could get round it. Whether I could do it within the 50 hours that we're going to give people, that would be interesting to know. but I'd just be worried about the toll on my health if I did have to push myself ridiculously hard to get through there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing's for certain, I'm not going to be lining up on that 100-mile start line at all. The idea of fast backing sounds fabulous, so that might be.
Yeah, well, we might have to do some fast backing trips over the course.
Yeah.
That's always an option.
Yeah, a bit of a course recce for people who are interested.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, we're certainly thinking we'd like to do some sort of familiarization.
Yeah.
Training camp.
Yeah.
Probably based out of Arrowtown.
Oh, amazing.
Very cool trail running bases we both know.
Yes, absolutely love Arrowtown, which was the last time I saw you in person when we bumped into you on the way back down from a bit of a loop that we were doing, had a beer at the Fork and Tap.
We were on course at that point, Mikki.
Oh, how fabulous. Mel, hey, thanks so much for taking time out of your Sunday to chat to me. As I say, I really wanted to kind of just have a bit of a yarn about, what you've done, what you're up to, and all things kind of trail running. Where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Usually in the pub.
Yeah. So obviously there's Wild Things. You're a regular on there, but otherwise?
Wildthings.club is the website. If you want to email me, mal@wildthings.club. I'm on Instagram as Mal's Adventures.
Yes.
And I'm on Facebook as Mal Law Adventurer Fundraiser Storyteller.
That's awesome. And particularly, I knew obviously you're an adventurer and a fundraiser, and you've really kind of highlighted the storyteller side of you this afternoon, which is always a pleasure. I absolutely love it. I love what you do, Mel. So thank you for your inspiration. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you for flattering me in that way, and thank you for the chat. Always lovely to talk, Mikki.
Okay guys, hope you really enjoyed that. You can see that Mel's just totally in his element when he's talking about running and community and that kind of thing, and you can just see how he's managed to create this sort of lifestyle for himself in addition to being able to give back to the running community, which I absolutely love. And what I will mention is that right now you do have the opportunity to join Mel in the Top of the South Island Tour 2021. So this is held from November 14th to the 21st, and it takes place around Marlborough Sounds, Nelson Lakes, Kahurangi and Abel Tasman, and this is 6 days of running and awesomeness at the top of the South Island, and it is guided by Mel and his wife Sally with full support from their partners at Adventure South New Zealand. It is limited to 12 people and it is bound to sell out, so I highly recommend for anyone who has a bit of running in their summer calendar, who wants to get a bit of a jump start on some base training, or you're just sort of already well oiled and you just want to get out there and run, go join Mel and Sally and the team for part of the Top of the South Island tour. As I said, you can find anything about Mel over on Wild Things on Facebook or at Mel's Adventures over on Instagram. Next week on the podcast, I'm delighted to bring to you my conversation with my really good friend Lara Bryden, who is the author of The Hormone Repair Manual, her new book that was out in February of this year, which is a follow-on from her first bestseller, The Period Repair Manual. Lara is the guru when it comes to hormones and health, and you do not want to miss this. Until then though, you can find me on Facebook at Mikki Williden Nutrition, over on Twitter and Instagram at Mikki Williden, or on my website mikkiwilliden.com, where you can sign up for my weekly email that I share information about what I'm thinking about and the research that I've been reading, or sign up to one of my meal plans, the Keto Longevity Plan, the Athlete Nutrition Plan, or just a real food plan, or one of my fat loss plans. You can do that over on the website, and you get a 28-day shopping list, you get access to my members only forum, and you get the ability to ask me any question any time of the day around nutrition through our online platform messaging system, so I can support you in your nutrition journey. Or hey, book a consultation. There might be some things that you need to figure out which you haven't quite gotten to the bottom of that I'll be able to help you with. Anyway, team, until next week, I hope you have a really great week, and I'll see you later.